The first punch landed hard, right in my ribs. I staggered back, gripping the edge of my stall to keep from falling. The crates of fresh-cut beef shook from the impact. Around me, the farmers' market froze. Vendors and customers turned toward the commotion, eyes wide, lips parted. But nobody stepped in. Not yet. "You're done here, meat boy." The voice was smooth but full of venom. Mr. Santos. The man who had been slithering around this market for weeks, pretending to be someone important. I wiped my mouth and looked up at him. His suit was spotless, but his knuckles were bloody. Not from me. No, he had been busy this morning. A few stalls down, I could see Mrs. Alvarez's fruit stand overturned, crates of oranges rolling across the pavement. Roddy, the fishmonger, lay on the ground, groaning, clutching his stomach. They had hit them first, and now it was my turn. "You think you can just walk in here and shut us all down?" I spat, straightening up, ignoring the pain in my ribs. Mr. Santos let out a slow, amused chuckle. Behind him, his goons spread out, wearing the same smug expressions. They were bigger than me, meaner than me, and clearly not just health inspectors. "You're not getting it, cowboy," he said, stepping closer. "We don't need your permission. This isn't a debate. This is a fucking eviction notice, and you—" He jabbed a finger into my chest. "You're just a piece of shit standing in our way." I had two choices: back down or fight. I made my decision the moment I saw one of them heading for my meat display, ready to overturn it like they did to Mrs. Alvarez's stand. I swung. My fist collided with Santos's jaw so hard that I felt it in my shoulder. He stumbled back, nearly tripping over a crate of vegetables. His sunglasses fell to the ground, and for the first time I saw his eyes, cold, calculating, full of rage. The crowd gasped. Some vendors took a step forward, some stepped back, and then chaos. Santos' men charged. The first one, a bald, tattooed monster, lunged at me, but I dodged, grabbing a metal scale from my stall and slamming it into his gut. He doubled over, and I brought my elbow down on the back of his head, sending him face first into the pavement. But the second one caught me. A fist cracked across my jaw, sending me spinning. My vision blurred for a second, but I stayed on my feet. I had to, because if I fell, this fight was over. Another goon grabbed me by my shirt, yanking me forward. Bad move. I grabbed a glass jar of honey from the stall next to mine and smashed it over his head. The impact sent sticky shards flying, and he stumbled back, cursing. "Mother!" Santos roared in frustration, wiping blood from his split lip. "Enough!" The market went dead silent. Even the vendors who had been inching closer stopped in their tracks. Santos pulled something from inside his suit. A piece of paper, crisp and official-looking. "You want to play tough guy?" he hissed, unfolding it and shoving it into my chest. "You think this is about me? About us? This is the Fing law now, Dipstadt. The Health and Safety Board is shutting down your stall. You sell one more goddamn steak, and you'll be in a cell so fast, you won't even get to say goodbye to your Fing cows." I ripped the paper from his hands and scanned it. A notice of violation. An order to cease operations. Signed by a town official I had never even heard of. It was bullshit. But it was official bullshit, and the look on Santos' face told me exactly what he thought of that. He thought he had won. I clenched my fists so tight I could feel my nails digging into my palm. "You think this is over?" I muttered. Santos smirked, turned his back, walked away, and his goons followed. The crowd remained frozen as I stood there, chest heaving, holding that paper like it was a death sentence. I had just lost the fight, but the war? The war was just getting started. The wind ripped through the market as I stood there, still catching my breath. The fight with Santos and his goons was over for now, but the real battle? It was just beginning. My stall was still standing, but it felt like the whole damn market had changed overnight. Roddy was still holding his ribs, sitting on a broken crate, his fish stand half trashed beside him. Mrs. Alvarez had tears in her eyes, gathering the last of her fruit from the ground, and the rest of the vendors? Silent, watching. Some of them had that look in their eyes, the one that said, "You should have kept your head down." Others? They looked pissed. "What the hell was that?" someone finally muttered. "That," I said, still tasting blood in my mouth, was the start of a fettin' war. The next morning I woke up to a voicemail. It was Santos. "You should have taken the hint, cowboy. Now you're gonna learn what happens when you feff with the wrong people." Click. A second later my phone buzzed again. Text message. Location, farmer's market, photo attachment, my stall. Completely trashed. My blood went ice cold. I jumped in my truck and sped down there. Sure enough, when I pulled up, I saw it. Meat thrown everywhere. My coolers tipped over, my knives gone. The tarp over my stall had been slashed to ribbons, and on the table, a dead rat right in the middle. A message, but they didn't know who they were dealing with. First thing I did, got my hands on security footage. Yeah, the market had cameras, not many, but enough. And you know what I saw? Two guys dressed as health inspectors walking in after hours. One of them? The same bastard who tried to fake a spoiled meat scare at my stall yesterday. The other? A guy I recognized from the background of Santos's crew. They were getting sloppy. I smiled. All right, motherfuckers, game on. This wasn't just intimidation anymore. They weren't just trying to muscle me out. They were desperate because I had messed up their timeline. So I started digging. I made a few calls, contacts in City Hall, people who owed me favors. "Ever hear of this Public Health and Safety Board?" I asked. Pause, then, "Never heard of it." "That's not a real department." I felt my stomach tighten. I knew it. "You sure?" "Dude, if there was a new agency with that kind of power, I'd know. It's fucking fake." Boom, there it was. A front. That night I sat in my truck, staring at my laptop screen, going through records, connecting the dots. And then, I found it. A list of properties recently bought up around the farmer's market, all under one company name. SL Holdings. A shell company. And at the bottom? A shipment record. Not for food, for pharmaceutical supplies, except there was no F-ing pharmacy anywhere near the market. And that's when it clicked. This wasn't just about banning meat. It was about clearing out legitimate businesses so they could move something else in, something illegal. I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding. This wasn't just local corruption. This was a cartel operation. And I had just stumbled right into it. The next day they came at me harder. First it was a city health inspector, a real one this time, nervous as hell, like he didn't even want to be there. "I need to inspect your stall," he said, voice shaking. "Go for it," I said, folding my arms. I was ready. He hesitated, checked a box on his clipboard. "Violation, non-compliant storage." I raised an eyebrow. "Storage is fine." "Want me to open the coolers?" He swallowed. Didn't look me in the eye. "Doesn't matter. You're getting a fine." I stepped closer. "Who told you to come down here?" His lip twitched. He didn't answer. "Was it Santos?" Still nothing. So I played my hand. "Listen, kid, you can write that fine or you can tell me the truth. Either way, you're going to have to live with what happens next." He hesitated. Then, in the softest voice, he muttered, "They told me to shut you down, or else." Boom. Now, even the real city officials were getting pressured. This went deeper than I thought. That night I got another message. Location, my ranch, photo attachment. My fence, cut open. Then another text. Next time, it won't be the fence. I felt my chest tighten with rage. They weren't just coming after my stall anymore. They were coming after me. So I grabbed my rifle, got in my truck, and drove out to my property, headlights off, heart pounding. If they were gonna F with me tonight, I'd be waiting. I parked in the shadows, climbed out, and listened. Silence. Then, a rustling. I crept forward, gun in hand, every nerve in my body on high alert. And that's when I saw them. Two figures moving along my fence line. One of them had bolt cutters. The other? A can of gasoline. They weren't just cutting my fence. They were about to burn my fucking barn down. I raised the rifle, clicked off the safety, moved one finger ninja, and I swear to God! They froze. Then they bolted. I fired once into the air. They ran like hell. By the time I reached the fence, they were gone. But they had left something behind. A patch. Embroidered, small, but clear as day. A cartel insignia. Santos wasn't just some local thug. This wasn't just a takeover. This was organized crime. And they had just declared war. I stood at the edge of my fence, gripping the patch in my fist. The insignia was small, but I knew what it meant. Cartel. And I had just pissed them off. The next morning I was back at the market, but things had changed. There were new faces, guys in cheap suits and too clean boots, pretending to be regulators but moving like enforcers. And Santos? He was nowhere to be seen. Instead, a new guy walked up, a city official flanked by 2 uniformed cops. "You're under investigation," he said flatly, handing me a citation the size of a finger novel. "You've been operating without proper permits, selling unregulated goods, and there have been multiple complaints about your stall." I laughed in his face. "That right? Who's been complaining? Let me guess. Some well-dressed a-hole with a fake title?" The official didn't blink. "You have 1 week to vacate your stall, or legal action will be taken." 1 week. 1 week before they shut me down permanently. I gritted my teeth and called my lawyer. "They can't do this, right?" There was a long pause on the other end. "Legally, no. But if they've got the right people in the city backing them, it'll take months to fight. And by then, your stall will be gone." Jesus Christ. "And listen," my lawyer's voice lowered, "be careful. If this is what I think it is, you're dealing with more than just corrupt officials. You're dealing with people who don't care about the law. No schlet." By midweek, the market was in chaos. Some vendors had already caved, packing up, selling their stalls, getting the hell out. Others? They were split. Some wanted to fight. Some wanted me to shut up before I got them all killed. "Look, man," one vendor, Tim, a guy who sold spices, whispered. "We get it, they're scumbags, but do you really think you're going to take down a fucking cartel?" "I don't have to take them down," I shot back. "I just have to expose them." He shook his head. "And then what? The cops do nothing? Or worse, they pretend to do something and you accidentally go missing?" He wasn't wrong. And the worst part, I could feel the paranoia creeping in. Some of the vendors who had supported me last week were avoiding me now. Even some of my customers were hesitant, scared of getting caught up in whatever was coming next. I could see it in their eyes. They knew it. I knew it. This was about to get ugly. Thursday night I was closing up shop, tossing the last of my unsold meat into the freezer when I heard the sound. Engines, multiple. I turned just in time to see 3 black SUVs pull up to the market. My stomach dropped. This wasn't official business. This was something else. The doors swung open, and Santos stepped out first. His lip was still split from our last fight, but now he was smiling. And behind him, 4 men. No badges, no fake permits, just muscle. "It's time for you to leave, cowboy." I set down my knife and stepped out from behind my stall. "And if I don't?" Santos's smile widened. "Then we stop being so effing polite." The biggest guy stepped forward. A shaved head, neck covered in tattoos. I recognized him. He was the one carrying the bolt cutters the other night. "We gonna do this again?" I asked, rolling my shoulders. He grinned. "This time, you don't get up." And then he swung. I ducked the first punch and drove my fist into his ribs, but it was like hitting a damn brick wall. His knee came up, slamming into my stomach, knocking the air out of me. I staggered back, but before he could follow up, Roddy came out of fucking nowhere. A metal pipe cracked across the guy's back, sending him sprawling. "Get the F off our market," Roddy shouted. And then, the vendors joined in. Mrs. Alvarez threw a crate at another thug. Tim, who had been hesitant earlier, swung a wooden pole like a goddamn warrior. And just like that, the whole market erupted. Santos backed away, furious. "You think this changes anything?" he snarled. I wiped blood from my mouth. "No, but I do." Then I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone and turned the screen toward him. Live feed. I had been recording everything. Santos' face fell. I smiled. "Game's over, a-hole." The market was a goddamn war zone. Santos was still standing, but his crew, his hired muscle, they were crumpled on the pavement. Roddy's pipe, Mrs. Alvarez's rage, and a whole lot of small-town fury had taken care of that. And me, I was grinning through bloody teeth, phone in hand, screen lit up, pointing straight at Santos' face. "Live feed, motherfucker," His expression cracked. I saw it. That flash of panic. The second he realized he wasn't in control anymore. Vendors murmured. Customers pulled out their own phones. Some were already calling news stations, friends, family. This wasn't just a street fight anymore. This was a goddamned reckoning. Santos tried to play it cool. "You think this proves anything?" he spat, voice shaky, but still trying to sound like he was in charge. "What, a couple of punches? A misunderstanding?" I tossed my phone to Tim, one of the vendors who had spent half the week doubting me. "Hey, Tim," I said, still staring Santos down. "Send that to every news station in the state, will ya?" Tim didn't even hesitate. "With fucking pleasure." I watched as Santos's entire posture shifted. His hands twitched at his sides like he was about to throw another punch. But he didn't, because he knew. It was over. He couldn't bury this. Couldn't buy his way out. Couldn't fake another health inspection or threaten another vendor into silence. This was public, and once the truth was out, the cartel would drop him faster than a dead mule. He took a step forward, lowering his voice. "You have no fucking idea what you've just done." I grinned wider. "Oh, I think I do." That's when we heard them. Sirens. And Santos panicked. First, it was local cops. They rolled in fast, lights flashing, doors swinging open before the cars had even fully stopped. But then, unmarked SUVs. I felt my stomach clench as I saw the men in suits step out. FBI. This was bigger than I thought. Santos must have realized it too, because his face twisted into something new. Fear. He whirled toward me, eyes blazing. "You called the feds?" I shook my head, genuinely amused. Didn't have to. Because while I'd been fighting to keep my stall, someone else had been watching. One of the FBI agents, tall, sharp suit, cold stare, stepped forward, flipping open a fat folder. "Mr. Santos," he said, voice smooth but lethal. "You're under arrest for racketeering, fraud, assault, and conspiracy to distribute controlled substances." The market went dead feckin' silent. Someone gasped. Even the vendors who had been afraid to get involved were now staring, frozen. And Santos? He laughed, a slow, ugly, desperate sound. "You don't know who the F you're messing with," he growled, stepping toward the agent. "You think this changes anything? You think—" The agent didn't even flinch. He just flipped through the file, pulled out a stack of surveillance photos. Santos meeting with cartel members, money being laundered through the market, shipments being moved in and out of fake vendor stalls. This wasn't just about me. This was a full-blown federal case. Santos's face drained of color. The feds had everything. Cops moved in fast. 2 officers grabbed Santos, twisting his arms behind his back as he snarled and fought. "You don't get it," he roared, spitting blood onto the pavement. "You think this ends here? You think—" One of the agents slammed him against the hood of a squad car. "Save it for your lawyer." Click. Handcuffs locked tight. And just like that, Santos was done. I exhaled, watching as the rest of his goons got dragged into cuffs, all of them looking just as shocked as he had been. Roddy let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be damned." Mrs. Alvarez wiped her hands on her apron, nodding. About effing time. The market erupted in noise, people talking, shouting, cheering, because the cartel was gone. And we had won. I turned back to the FBI agent, still feeling like I'd just walked out of a goddamn war zone. "So what happens now?" I asked. The agent gave me a knowing look. "Now, you get your market back." I stood there watching as the squad cars pulled away, sirens wailing, taking Santos and his crew straight to hell. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. Roddy clapped me on the shoulder. "You just took down a fucking cartel, man." I exhaled. "Nah, I just held the line. The cartel took themselves down." By the next morning, the news had spread like wildfire. The market was packed. People who had been avoiding the place for weeks now flocked back in droves. I saw old customers returning, smiling, supporting vendors again. The air was lighter, the tension gone, and best of all, the stalls that Santos had bought up and forced people out of, seized, turned over to the city, waiting to be given back to the real vendors. We had our market back, and the effers who tried to take it, they were rotting in a cell. I thought it was over. But later that night I got one last call, an unknown number. I hesitated, then picked up. "You made a lot of noise, cowboy." A slow, measured voice. A voice I didn't recognize. "Santos was just a pawn. You should watch your back." Click. Dial tone. I stared at the phone, and I realized this wasn't over. Not really. Santos was gone. But the bigger machine, the real power behind him, they were still out there. And I had just put myself on their radar. I exhaled. Then I grabbed my coat, stepped outside, and looked toward the market. The people, the stalls, the community we had fought to protect. And I made a decision. If they came back, if they tried again, I'd be waiting. The morning after Santos got hauled away, I woke up to silence. No threatening texts, no slashed fences, just the sound of the wind rolling over my ranch. For the first time in weeks, I didn't wake up wondering if my stall would be there. I didn't have to double-check my security cameras or sleep with my rifle next to the bed. The cartel was gone. And the market? It was finally ours again. I showed up that morning, coffee in one hand, fresh steaks in the other. The second I stepped out of my truck, I could feel it. Something different. The tension was gone. No more shady guys lurking near the stalls. No more fake health inspectors throwing their weight around. Just real vendors, real customers. And the first thing I saw? Mrs. Alvarez. Her fruit stand was back, stocked higher than I'd ever seen it. She was grinning like she'd just won the lottery. "Morning, mijo," she said, tossing me an apple. "Hell of a show yesterday." I took a bite. "Took all of us," I said, and I meant it. Roddy, Tim, Mrs. Alvarez, hell, even the vendors who had been too scared to fight at first. They all had a part in taking back our town. Roddy walked up next, setting up his fish stall. "Guess I won't need this anymore," he muttered, tossing his metal pipe onto a pile of old crates. "Keep it," I said, "just in case." We shared a look, because we both knew this might have been a victory, but it wasn't the end. Santos was gone, but his bosses, the real men pulling the strings, they weren't done, and neither was I. That night I got a call, not from a block number, not from a cartel thug. It was from the mayor. "We need to talk," he said. So I drove down to City Hall, walked into a room full of town officials, and I saw it in their faces. Guilt, regret, fear. These were the same people who had ignored the cartel creeping in, who had looked the other way while fake regulations ran good vendors out of business, and now they had to answer for it. "We failed you," the mayor said. "We failed this town." I didn't say anything, I just waited. Because I wasn't here for apologies. I was here to make sure this never happened again. They laid it all out. New laws to protect the market. Real health inspectors. Ones who couldn't be bought. New security measures. Cameras, oversight, actual police presence that wasn't corrupt. And then, "We want you to help oversee it." I blinked. "You serious?" The mayor nodded. "You fought harder for this town than any of us did. We need someone who won't let it happen again." It should have felt like a win, like justice, but all I could think about was that last phone call. "You made a lot of noise, cowboy." The market was safe, for now, but I had put myself on a list, and somewhere out there someone was waiting for the right moment to push back. I exhaled. "I'll think about it." Weeks passed. The market boomed. People who had stopped coming out of fear now returned in droves. Stalls that had been boarded up were reopened. And the best part? The properties Santos had snatched up, the ones his cartel bosses had bought out, seized by the feds, turned back over to local vendors. We didn't just beat them, we took everything back. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for some leftover thug to try and take a shot at me, for a message carved into my door, but nothing came. Because the cartel had bigger problems now. The feds weren't just looking at our town anymore, they were digging deeper, and word was, the bosses were pissed. Pissed that Santos fed up, pissed that their operation collapsed overnight. They weren't worried about revenge. They were worried about survival, and as long as that kept them out of my town, I didn't give a damn. One evening I was closing up my stall when a woman walked up. She looked out of place. Not a local. Sharp suit, no-nonsense expression, FBI. "You're the rancher," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "You're the feds," she smirked. "Santos' case is bigger than we thought. The information you uncovered helped us build something even bigger." I didn't respond, because I knew what she was about to say. "We might need you again," I sighed. Shook my head. "Lady, I'm just a butcher." She smiled. "Sure you are." Then she handed me a card. "If anything unusual happens again, give me a call." And just like that, she was gone. The sun was setting. The market was quiet. For the first time in a long time, I felt like things were finally back to normal. I leaned against my truck, watching the people, the stalls, the community we'd fought for, and I made a decision. If they came back, if they tried this ST again, I'd be waiting.